Did I hit my mark, young lady? Thank you. Well, I want to thank Marcia this morning for the invitation, giving me the opportunity to come and speak with you for a bit. I guess primarily my job today is to take some really boring information and try to make it palatable and presentable. Again, my name is Orvil McKinnis. I work for Summers Engineering out of Hanford, California. We're a engineering firm, consulting engineers, and we are the administrators of the Irrigated Land Regulatory Program for the West Side San Joaquin River Watershed Coalition and also the Grasslands Drainage Area Coalition, which is just directly west of us here. I've been in the water business for 20 years, 15 years with Westlands Water District. I manage their Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, and I have been with Summers Engineering now for nearly 5 years doing the same thing for the West Side San Joaquin River Watershed Coalition. The overview, as you'll see on your panel there, I want to talk a little bit about our purpose, some new requirements in the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, a little summary of some historical monitoring data, which will be of interest to you today. I think I have good news to share with you, and I hope you receive it as good news. We also want to talk about nutrient management, which really is the new big driver in this program. Nitrogen is going to be a real issue. Nitrated groundwater, I'm sure you're all familiar with that, is on the legislation's drawing board. Every chance they get, they dial in on that, and so we're going to talk about that a little bit. Then we'll give you a little bit of Q&A in the end if we need that. Your next panel there, our function, we cover the west side of the from the San Joaquin River basically to the I-5, from Tranquility here in the south all the way to Vernalis on the north, and that's our area. The coalition was formed by the San Joaquin Valley Drainage Authority, which is comprised of water districts on the west side, and many of you may get water from CCID or other groups, the San Luis Canal Company or the San Luis Water District, kind of in this area, and they're part of that, and that's why this coalition was formed, because they wanted to help the growers comply with the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, so that you wouldn't be doing it individually, but you could do it as a group effort. And so again, that's why I'm here today, to help you comply with water quality regulatory issues. And if you didn't know it, I'm always surprised that farmers don't realize that since 1969, with the Porter Cologne Act, you've been required to monitor and report on-farm activities. It just wasn't enforced, it just wasn't required, but it was in the law, it was in the regulation. And so with water quality becoming an issue in the last couple of decades, they've really dialed in on the regulation, getting more and more intense with the monitoring and with the reporting, and so hence we have this coalition, and I monitor and I report on your behalf as a group. We also manage and we monitor and report for the chlorpyrifos and Diazinon TMDL, total maximum daily load program on the San Joaquin River, which this watershed that's represented mostly by you guys here today, you have an impact, either beneficial or not beneficial, to the San Joaquin River. We manage 460,000 acres, more or less. We monitor 17 different tributaries to the San Joaquin River. We have 3 sites on the river we monitor. We have 1 on the DMC that we monitor also. We're testing monthly for pesticides, general chemistry, that's pH, E. coli, TDS, things like that in the water. We also test aquatic toxicity. We have a laboratory that takes the water off these monitoring sites. They introduce different animals, little creatures, to the water, and they look at them to see what's happened, if they live or die. We also test sediment toxicity, which is a big issue also, maybe not so much here in the south where you have more of the kind of clayey soils. Up north we have the more sandy soils and a lot of runoff. Up there we get those sediment issues. And we report this information back to the regional board twice a year, semi-annually. I've got a big report coming in. Believe me, we no longer go by how many pages we do. I think we now go by how many pounds it weighs. It's over 1,500 pages. The report every 6 months that I prepare on behalf of the growers and the entire coalition to report at the results of monitoring and the other issues that are going on. So it's a big, big deal, and we're trying to give it your money's worth. We also develop management plans. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, management plans, and why we have the need for them. In January, next slide here, January 9th, 2014 was a new waste discharge order came into being. That we had been operating under a previous order that began in like 2003, 2004. But this new program that began in 2014, it has some new requirements, and so that's why you've been seeing more activity. That's why those forms have been showing up at your doorstep and asking for more information and more information. That's why you're required to attend meetings and such. And also, another component of this, since 2004 up to 2014, the program had just dealt with surface water. We were monitoring the quality of surface water. But groundwater has been introduced now, and the state has said that we need to protect the beneficial use of groundwater that you guys are pumping and using, and perhaps that not just growers, but everybody is making an impact, to groundwater. Somebody at the home, they're introducing nitrate fertilizer on their lawn, and if it goes past the root zone, there's a possibility that nitrate could go down to groundwater. And so we're worried about farmers, so we're here to kind of help and collect information and demonstrate, hopefully, that our growers are doing everything to the best of their ability to be protective of groundwater. And I've underlined there more grower involvement. Gentleman, as I came in today, needs me to help just look at a form that he has to fill out, and it becomes more apparent that growers are getting more and more and more involved with the regulation, with the direct interaction with the state through the coalition, but it requires more effort on your part. So very quickly, these new groundwater monitoring requirements, we were required to create a groundwater assessment report, which we did, and the idea was to determine low vulnerability areas for nitrate to groundwater. They looked at existing groundwater data, they used existing geologic and hydrologic data that was available, and they came up with a map, a schematic if you please, of areas that were considered high vulnerable and areas that were considered low vulnerable. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. This groundwater assessment report was completed in 2015 and was going to have to be updated again in 2020. And we hope with some real positive results. So the GAR defined these areas for groundwater monitoring of nitrogen, salts, and other certain pesticides. And I'd like to state from the onset, you may be familiar already with this groundwater high vulnerability discussion because you've been getting forms to fill out. If you have been doing the nitrogen management plan, nitrogen summary reports, and you were in a high vulnerable area for nitrogen, for nitrate. Excuse me. And you weren't picked because we determined that you were putting nitrates in the groundwater. It's just, if you imagine when we start the process, we just kind of wiped all of civilization off the map. And all we looked at was existing groundwater data and existing hydrology and geology. The engineering firm, Scalmanini and Ludorf, very reputable firm, creates this map that shows these areas, and then we took your farms and laid them back over on top of that topography, and then because you hit the mark, you were in the area, you got picked to be part of the high vulnerable area. Again, it's not because we felt you were doing something or the state felt you were doing something. It's just you were in an area that was deemed to be potential for impact to groundwater. It's interesting, they actually use the word waste. That nitrogen is considered a waste, and I really struggle with that sometimes. Because I like my leafy greens to be really green. So the new requirement, we switch to the next page there, new requirement for growers. If you're in high vulnerable areas for surface water and groundwater, you've got to complete that farm evaluation plan. You got to get it delivered by March 1st every year into my office. We began this in December of 2014, collecting year 2014 data. This year, this is the 4th iteration. And in case you didn't know, if you're filling out your forms, we're asking for information from last year, 2017. Your farm evaluation and your nitrogen management plan summary is telling us what you did last year. The nitrogen management plan, and at the very end we'll talk about that, is for this coming year, what you plan on doing. But you have to have that nitrogen management plan since we're talking about it. It's got to be in your files, prepared, certified if it needed to be by April 15th every year. And then you prepare based on last year's data and information, your final information on nitrogen application and what you yielded on your fields. You prepare a nitrogen summary report that's due March 1st, again, back at our offices. Now I realize we may have growers from other coalitions. You may be in the Westlands area, you may be on the east side, and you may be represented in other coalitions. I'm not speaking for them, I'm speaking for the West Side Area Coalition, the San Joaquin River Watershed Coalition. Excuse me. So you've got to prepare this nitrogen summary report by March 1st. Also, if you were in an area that was deemed to be potential for sedimentation and erosion, you had to have an erosion control plan. And you may be currently dealing with that. We've had the regional board required us to go back and look at properties that the soil type didn't tell us it would be erosive, but they said because you were next to a waterway, we had to look at that a little closer. So you may got another update, or you may have gotten it for the first time last year to have to do one of those. You're also required to attend at least one annual meeting. Between you, me, and the fence post outside, if you miss one of our meetings this year for the West Side Coalition, or even for the Grasslands Drainage Area Coalition that we had last Friday at the VFW Hall, if you missed that, come see me after the meeting and perhaps we can get credit for you with this meeting today, because I'm discussing the same things today in part that we discussed at those meetings. So if you need credit for that, let me know at the end of the meeting. And also a requirement for you, which goes without saying, is that the idea is for growers to implement best management practices that are protective of water quality, groundwater and surface water. Now we have responsibilities that we perform on your behalf. We conduct education and outreach to inform growers of the requirements that are in the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program. In part, that's why I'm here today. I'm also here today because I'm curious about growers. I'm curious about farming. I'm curious about the cotton business and those kind of things. I see those bales and all that stuff, and I love to talk to cotton farmers and find out why did we go from rectangular bales to round things now. I don't get that. So maybe somebody after the meeting, you can clue me in on what's going on with that. That's so that when I'm in a meeting with people, I can act like I know things and spot off stuff and seem to be really important and smart. We conduct regional monitoring. We don't monitor directly here in the Firebaugh area, but we do in the Pozo sloughs and those areas in the Salt Slough and those kinds of places in the upper water or the lower watershed from this area. We are getting ready to do what's called a manager practice evaluation program. And the purpose of that is that we're going to identify best management practices for certain crops and certain soil types, mainly with an emphasis on nitrogen application. We're going to have to determine how much nitrogen moves past the root zone with any given crop and any given soil type. It's a big, big project that is being done on your behalf. The idea is to help growers be able to understand that, look at, if this is the crop, this is the soil, if you're putting this much nitrogen on, we believe that you're putting this much nitrogen past the root zone. Now, everybody understands that we can't get it to be 1-to-1. That just isn't possible in this world. But again, the idea is not to penalize you. That's not what we're doing this for. It's just simply the state has mandated that you're going to have to be able to have information at your fingertips so that you'll know how much nitrogen would be beneficial for that crop given that soil type. Now, that's going to take many years to get there. And there's going to be a lot of input by stakeholders, of which you're one of them. And we hope that you'll be involved in that process. We prepare and update, as we already said, the groundwater assessment report to be updated in 2020. That's a big, big deal. And we hope that the groundwater monitoring we're going to be doing in the next 3 or 4 years is going to demonstrate that there has been some trend to the good on that. But again, everyone understands that it took a long time for the nitrate to get in the groundwater, and it isn't just going to disappear in a year or two. But again, we're working on that on your behalf. And then we report, the big thing we do is report all the results of things that we're doing back to the regional board. So if we look over at the monitoring program, the next slide there, we monitor monthly, and then we have to also do 2 rain events a year to see what's happening with water that's moving across farmlands and into these creek beds. As I said, we won't mention all the things that we're checking. You can read them there for yourself. We collect about 12 gallons of water at every site. It's a lot of water, not just in a big jug. It goes into all kinds of special bottles. It's a really, really intricate thing that's being done. We have 2 crews, one in the south, one in the north, that take the samples for us, so they need a courier along the highway at a certain time, a range time. They pick it up and take them into the laboratories up in the Bay Area. And you can see the cost there. It's about $2,400 a site. If you multiply it out, that's about $660,000 a year that's being spent just on monitoring alone. And again, we would prefer not to have to do all this monitoring, but the state requires it, and they're always wanting more. We're really pushing back all the time, explaining to them, because they'll say, look, it's only another 25 cents an acre. Well, we know that, and we understand that. Our growers talk to us about it all the time, that we're not the only one in line in front of them saying it's only a nickel, it's only a quarter, it's only $1 per acre. We're well aware this is an expensive program. We're doing our best to keep costs at the minimum. Now I'd like to, this is kind of the crux of what we're going to finish up with this morning, is this coalition-wide monitoring results. We see that slide there. You got to get in your head that the state looks at things in a 3-year period, and that they have a requirement that if there's more than one exceedance in any 3-year period of a water quality parameter, we have to do a monitoring, or excuse me, a management plan for that constituent. So if it's, say, chlorpyrifos, and we discovered chlorpyrifos at a site twice in a 3-year period, we have to come up with a written plan prepared on your behalf, given it to the state, that explains to them in detail how we're going to manage that issue, how we're going to go look at it, how we're going to try to find out where it's coming from, and most importantly, how to end the exceedances. Maybe you've been the beneficiary of our guy Dave, or before him Mr. Peltzer, has been at your farm, knocking on your door with a little packet of information, talking to you about a pesticide application you made in the last month, before that exceedance. And the idea when we come is not to say you did it, because we don't know that you did it. There's no way we could know you did it unless we did on-farm, monitoring every time you made applications. It doesn't work that way. But because you provide public information through the PUR, we get that data. We're required to get that data and find out who applied that constituent in an area that could have been affected, that could have affected that monitoring area, and then go to them with a packet of information. And so if that happens to you, again, we're not pointing a finger. We would never do that because we couldn't point the finger. But we're just telling you, we know that you applied the pesticide in the right time frame and its half-life, and we just provide you with some best management practices that we'd like you to look at and consider for your operation. And really, because we're in this more of a commercial type situation now these days, it would be really important that if you get in that situation, to reach out to your pesticide applicator, to the guy who's putting your pesticides on, and make sure he understands, look at, a pesticide was applied in the area, in my farm area, by you, that could have been the cause of this. Again, we're not saying it was, but just, we'd really love to be able to reach out as far as we could to all the people involved with that pesticide to make sure they understand that there are ways that it has to be applied that are protective of water quality. And I want you to see, if you look at the numbers there, you see some 1s, some 4s, and 8, 3s. Anytime there's more, it's bigger than 1, so 2 or more, it required a management plan. It triggered a management plan, and we had to come up again with a plan how we're going to deal with that constituent. We have hundreds of management plans, hundreds. Trying to keep up with it is almost a nightmare. But again, I've got some good news to deliver to you. And I'm talking, when we're talking today, we're talking about the Salt Slough area, and I'm going to draw to a close here really soon. It's the Salt Slough focused area here. You see the sites that we monitor: Salt Slough at Lander, Salt Slough at Sandam, the Pozo Slough at Indiana Avenue, and we focused on these pesticides and nutrients. And that's an added component. And if you look down at that next slide, you'll see exceedances for those monitoring areas from 2015 through 2017. My colleague came last year to this group, Chris Linneman. I was here before him, so that would have been, what, in 2016. Since 2016, things have gotten exponentially better in this area with detections. And you can see there are a lot of zeros there, a lot of 1s. I love zeros in those boxes, man. Yes, sir.
Does the 0 mean that you found nothing?
Nothing. No, it means,
or you did, an exceedance is over a certain limit.
yeah. But we may have detected the chemical, but it didn't exceed
The
water
limit
quality.
that somebody said was toxic.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
The state established that. It's in the basin
Okay.
plan.
Okay.
And I picked the constituents that are of concern in this area because you grow cotton, you grow corn, you grow tomatoes, and other commodities like that. We know what kind of chemicals we applied. And so we picked those things that we thought would be nice to look at for this group here. Next slide. And I've got this I've circled all the zeros. These are excellent results. And what this means is that because we've got zeros there now for 3 years, we're able to go to the state and say, look, we believe we've completed the management plan. The growers have been notified. They've been working at it. We can tell by the information you give back to us on your farm evaluation, on your nitrogen summary reports and such. We can take that data, we can kind of mine through it, and we can say, look, here's some changes that have happened that we believe have been beneficial to water quality, and lo and behold, we've got zeros. We didn't have detections. So then we have to write a huge report, probably 30 pages for each constituent, on your behalf. Send that to the state, they review it, and if they believe that everything's been done correctly, that we've done due diligence, there's been no detections, and we get to wipe that off. And so it looks good for the grower, it looks good for our coalition. The second slide down there on that page with the yellow, those are 1s. It's not, as I said, they're not too bad. 1 in a 3-year period. We still don't have to do anything about it. But we have to understand that if there's one more exceedance, that again, if the one exceedance was in 2015, that may not count. But if it was, say, more closer to 2017, it may trigger another management plan, and that requires another report to be written and a lot of work. Sir.
So on this, where you have a 1 circle, like let's say the Pozo Slough, there's a 1 circle in yellow. Now you would have checked that 12 times each year, right?
Yeah.
Because you go every month.
Yeah.
So that means that it was only an exceedance 1 month out of that 2-year period?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay.
3-year period.
Yeah. 3 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Wouldn't this diagram be good rather than not so bad? Don't you go excellent, good, not so bad?
One time in 3 years.
I'm trying to cut the time down here. I understand your point, it's well taken, but it's not so bad because we're on a threshold. One more exceedance. If we go to Pozo Slough one more time, malathion shows up as the exceedance. And let me say this, malathion, if I remember correctly, any detection of malathion most likely is an exceedance. It's such a small number that will trigger a management plan. So it's
How long does the 1 stay on the record?
3 years.
And then you start over?
Yeah, then they drop off.
One fellow that drank it, the politician, is he still alive?
Probably, yeah. Yeah. We'll get to the not so good part. And really for this drainage area, this sub-watershed, we'll go to that next slide, next page. Just the real issue here, really for a new management plan, was nitrogen. And fertilizer was picked up twice in the Pozo Slough. And we can almost give the alfalfa guys kind of a slide, right? Some guys do apply a little bit, especially with new stuff, but the nitrogen is coming from someplace. It could be a homeowner. It could be a homeowner washing nitrate into the slough from their, off their own property. I don't know. It could be anything. But the problem is, you guys buy it not by the tons, but by the megatons as a group. You guys are a big target on the radar with nitrogen, and that's why this is such a big deal. Because there's nitrate in groundwater. It's not good for people to drink it above a certain threshold. And because you guys use it, and you use it in large quantities, you get picked on. And I don't know what number is the right number to put on. You guys have a handle on that. But we're going to find out, really, is 180 pounds per acre on almonds, in kind of clayey soils, is that the right number?
Unknown caller.
It's on you.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot going on. We understand that. But look, I want to stress something to you today about the data you give us. Give us the best quality data you can. I've been hearing rumors that some guys are just putting a number they want us to see, that they think is the number we want. That's going to be bad in the end. This thing's going to come to a point where they're going to create a minimum and a maximum, maybe decades down the road. But if guys have been giving us the wrong number, and it should have been higher because that's what it really was, that could be a problem. So it's your operation, it's your management issue. You think about that, but for me, the non-farmer, I really want you to give me the best quality data you can, because I want to fight for the right number for your application, for your farm, for your crop. Also, if we can skip down there to the next slide, we have these chlorpyrifos and Diazinon detections for the TMDL program in the San Joaquin River. You notice that Diazinon has kind of dropped off the radar there. There's been no detection since 2012, but chlorpyrifos still shows up, and we've got to really, really work on that, because the total maximum daily load program in the San Joaquin River is a statewide. Everybody in the state is looking at that. And growers, because you buy chlorpyrifos, if you apply chlorpyrifos again, you get to be first in line. The state thinks that you guys have, in fact, there are some that are convinced that you're out there at night applying it by the drum loads, spraying it on, killing every bug there is, and then you say, okay, that's enough, and you get your water hose and you're just watering it down and throwing it off into the creek. There's some people in this world that think that. And of course, we know that's not the case. Now, I'm going to say I believe it's the guys on the east side. The east side guys, I agree with that.
Well, I'm on that coalition too, so hold on.
Oh, we got an east side guy. I'm sorry. Don't shoot me. It was just a joke. Look at any questions real quick.
How many growers are reporting to you right now?
We have, I think it's 1,683 separate growers in the west side.
How many?
1,683 different growers.
All of them reported?
Yeah.
They were all identified over a hot spot, like you earlier described, or?
Yeah, surface water mainly. And groundwater only because there's nitrates that are present in the ground, or it has the potential. It doesn't mean it's doing it, it's just, that's how many are in. Basically, surface water, everybody's in. And getting a form and having to fill it out. Probably only about half, probably about 800 are in the nitrogen high vulnerable areas. I want you to look real quick at the nitrogen management plan worksheet. The goal, for you that are doing it right now, those goal sections or goldenrod are the only ones that need to be filled out right now. Those are your planning numbers
That's for 18.
for 18, for 2018.
So that's the same conclusion plan. You just have to fill out what you anticipate.
Yeah, you and your CCA will work on that, or maybe you can do it yourself, and you figure out what you're gonna use. It's a plan, and you're not stuck with those numbers. You need to farm wisely, and, you may have to change your plan along the way. And in the box there, it's number 14, if you make any radical changes to your plan, make it know why. It could have been pest, issues, might have been some drought condition, whatever it may have been that required more or less nitrogen to be applied from what your plan started with. Mark that down so that you know, and that if there's ever anyone questioning it, because what we're going to do at the end of the year, we're going to send you, and it's going to come in the next week or two, you're going to get a report card with a bell curve on it. And it's going to tell you how you did with your commodity, with other growers in your area. And if you get a red dot, it means you were an outlier, that you were in the top 10% of users of nitrogen in your area. Doesn't mean you did it wrong, but that's why box 14 comes into play. Because then if I'm required, if you were such an outlier, that I have to follow up with you and say, yeah, well, I did use that much, but here's why I used that much. And so then in our report back to the state, we'll say, yeah, we had an outlier. We don't name who you are, where you're at. We just say, yeah, there was an outlier. We talked to them, we talked to her, whoever it is, and they told us why. There was some drought issues, pesticide stuff that caused this to use more. It doesn't mean you used too much. It just means that compared to everyone else, you used more than they did. And lastly, we can see on the back sheet there, the nitrogen management plan summary report. That needs to be filled out and sent to me by March 1st. If you have any issues, let me know. A big problem is the A divided by Y. Applied nitrogen in pounds per acre. The people who sell you the nitrogen can help you with that if you need be. At some level, I can help you if you know some gross numbers perhaps. I can help you on the phone. But you need to get it in pounds per acre. And if you can get your yield in pounds per acre, then you divide a nitrogen applied by your yield, A divided by Y, or A over Y, and that's that number. And I know the number looks odd, it looks weird, but it means something. Give us that number to the best of your ability. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
You may have already answered this, but I'm getting confused about the last 50 or say 40, 50 years, we've been flood irrigating the whole San Juan.
Yes, sir.
Now we're going to above ground drip, and we're going to take and grow crops. And maybe that hay, they haven't done it with flooding being there. But with all the new technology, this is where I'm getting confused about. Compared to the way we used to flood, say ground in the Dos Palace area, the CCI, everything else, where we used to go on the roads and all over. Now, the technology has made it so that we can apply the nitrates at maybe 1 or 2 inches per day. It's not really going out or based on how the plants are using it and how much water it needs. We're still applying, say, 1 or 2 or 3 a year. But how are the nitrates, if we're applying it that way, I can see flood irrigation going down. But if we're only applying it as the plant needs it and the nutrient it needs, how is it going to get into the water supply?
Well, we're going to find that out. That's going to be discoverable. It's going to cost money for us to find that out. But your logic is correct. We believe that's the case. That drip irrigation and those kind of micro-type irrigations are the technology of the future. They're here now, and we're hoping we get everybody doing that. And we think it's a great thing. But the state doesn't say, yeah, that on the surface that looks right. They want us to prove that. That's the problem, sir. We have to prove it.
Okay, so then the thing that they have to prove is that everybody in this room is going that route, okay? But then if we have a year like we had last year, where we had 10, 12 inches of rain, and those nitrates are at a certain level, if they didn't go to the water supply, and the flooding took it down, are we going to be blamed for that?
Well, the problem is that doesn't happen overnight. You're right. It pushes it down, and at some point it gets into a water column. It gets into a zone of saturation, and it can then begin to migrate on its own without any other effort, hydraulically from above. It's just a capillary action. but that'll take decades for that to happen. You're dialing in on the problem. It's not an easy solution. It's not an easy answer to these complex questions. Any other questions?
Where are all your reports and data available? If we wanted to look and see how the last 36 tests went, is that on the internet, or can we request a report?
Yeah, you
Summary,
can-
not 1,500 pages.
No, I want to give you the whole thing, man. No, you can call my office, and if you're a grower and you're in our system and you're represented, you're representing a grower, you have every right to have that information. We're more than happy to give it to you. And my contact information is on that last slide. Marsha, I think we're done. Thank you.
Okay.